Last time, our protagonist Kim Yi-won joined forces with Hargon to set an ambush for the Jackals, where they obtained all their CP and Asgard nodes and exterminated all the Jackals. Outside the cave, Yuan watches over Hargon, who is mentally exhausted after the slaughter. However, Yuan tells him that if they leave it be because of guilt, the Jackals will be the ones to benefit from it. Hargon clears his mind after Yuan's few words, and compliments him for his strong mentality and kindness to do what's right for no gain. To which Yuan pulls out the Asgard notes as he says, "Not for no gain," and offers to split it with him. Hargon, with a hand on his head, gives in and accepts the blood money. Later that day, in the cave, Agamemnon and his subordinates observe the pile of burnt and rotting corpses. His subordinate informs him Runechon is probably amongst them, and the money is gone, which sees Agamemnon scream in uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, in his room, Yuan holds his share of the Asgard notes that total 384,000 CP. He thinks he'd like to exchange them for CP with Asgard now, but that would expose them to Olympus, so he decides to hold off for now. He then lays down and pulls out the unknown egg. Hargon told him his reward was a top rank item, Hand of the Thunder King, so his egg must be at least the same level as the Dark Divine Crystal or something of a higher level. His focus then drawn to the pattern on the egg, which makes the world around him distort and reminds him of the outer god. After that, the egg greets him through a system message, and he asks it, "What are you?" A few days pass and Yuan stands in front of the smithy, wondering if the unknown egg will be his ally or enemy when it hatches. Most creatures that hatch from eggs recognize the first thing they see as their mother and become a powerful ally, but he thinks it's a stupid gamble and he shouldn't rush. Now inside the smithy, he sits down with Volcro, who asks him what type of armor and weapons he likes, because he has some leftover materials. Yuan asks if he needs materials for that, but Volcro informs him that the leftovers can be combined with the mithril he has. Yuan puts his head down dejectedly, since that would be expensive and he won't have enough CP. However, Volcro, sensing his thoughts, says he'll put it on tab, and that since he trusted him with the stone, he's just returning the favor. Yuan smiles at Volcro, who's just as he remembers, and pulls out his sword to show him what he wants. Volcro, smiling in return, as swords are his specialty. A week later, at the Olympus Guildhouse, Agamemnon prepares to complete a mission that could make up for his failure. The Olympian walks outside to the army of players they gathered from the 1st to 10th floors and declares they'll be arresting the criminal. Meanwhile, Volcro has completed the gemstone and admires its beauty. As he waits for Yuan to arrive, he hears a rumbling from outside. He grabs his hammer and tentatively approaches the door. He exits to the side of the army of Olympus led by Agamemnon, who points his sword toward him, the criminal Hephaestus. Hearing his name, the army get nervous, but their leader says a ranker's power is restricted on the 1st floor. Still, his strength is more than enough to shake them up, and he tells them to shut it and come at him. Agamemnon in turn insults him as a cripple and says that they brought a ranker of their own, as Chryseis, an Olympus high ranker under Apollo, steps up. The two high rankers face off, one with a thunderous hammer and the other a fiery spear. Hephaestus grits his teeth and unleashes his strength, creating chaos and destruction in the town. The head-on clash of these two rankers decimating the surrounding buildings and players from the sheer force. In the midst of their intense clashes, Chryseis reveals that he respected Hephaestus for being true to himself, and he doesn't really want to fight him, but still comes forth with his spear, resulting in a clash that erupts with an enormous explosion of power. The smoke clearing to show the half-petrified state of Hephaestus thanks to the shield now in Chryseis' hand, the replica of the Aegis shield that Hephaestus had created, sealing him in stone. Agamemnon then tells his men to drag away his body, when Yuan appears and refuses to allow that. One of the soldiers losing their leg to Yuan, who stares them down with blazing fury in his eyes. Agamemnon asks what he's doing, as Yuan thinks that their actions must mean they really need the old man for their gigantomachia. Yuan stands in front of the old man, who already shows signs of lifting the petrification, to which Agamemnon tells the army to kill Yuan and bring the criminal. When one of them hesitates because of the penalty for killing new players, he takes off his head and states, "What of it?" The rest then charge in to kill Yuan. Yuan infuses his sword with the colossal fire and sends out fiery slashes, burning them and blowing them away. Next, he uses Cinder Eyes to analyze the path and swiftly moves through them, dispatching those on his way. Yuan then raises his hand and forms a Mana Blast to counter the one bearing down on him, the collision resulting in an explosion of magic power. Yuan calls them weak as he asks if they think they'll win with numbers alone, whilst the rest surround him. Agamemnon shaken at the insane ability of a new player. This time Yuan incinerates them with the skill Fire Pillar as they scream in agony. Yuan grits his teeth as he continues to wait for the old man, when he barely resists Sun Shard, an attack from Chryseis, who has stepped forward and questions why a customer is jumping into this. Yuan thinks he is indeed a ranker despite the penalty, so he can't lower his guard. With his sword put away, he activates Gigantification as Chryseis walks toward him, with his spear emanating fire. He launches the Spear of Fire at Yuan, who attempts to face it head on, only to fail to resist the Sun Shard and be inflicted with burn. The flames then come to swallow him, and he fires 3 Mana Blasts to counter, but the fire morphs to evade them and washes over him like a tidal wave. Coming out the other side, his burn has been increased to level 2 as he gasps for air, whilst Chryseis suffers from the backlash of the penalty. Yuan tries to use Gigantification again, but in the next moment, Chryseis punches him in the chest and sends Yuan flying into a building before throwing up blood from the penalty. In the wreckage of the building, Yuan thinks he may have underestimated him, then smiling as he spots the refined, pure dark divine crystal. Meanwhile, Chryseis is thinking back on Apollo's warning of how great the power of the tower is. He can't help but agree as the weight of the penalty has left him on his last legs. Then, as Agamemnon goes to collect Hephaestus, thinking it's over, the building behind him explodes. Yuan re-entering with the crystal in one hand and his sword in the other. When Agamemnon steps up, Chryseis stops him. He warns him not to take him lightly as his mana has the dark element and he is dangerous. However, Agamemnon brushes him off and says he'll deal with it since he looks tired. Yuan then disappears and takes out 2 more soldiers before Agamemnon can react. Yuan, appearing next to the old man, checks to see he will soon break free. As the army regroups, he concentrates his mana into the stone and releases a pulse of dark element mana, which seems to drain their souls, incapacitating them. The observing Chryseis smiles at the scene of a new monster entering the tower, to Agamemnon's annoyance. However, Chryseis ignores him and heads back toward the fight, whilst Yuan continues the onslaught. Yuan's mana of the fire and dark element fill the atmosphere as Chryseis approaches. Chryseis impressed even further at his ability to control 2 elements, which is hard even for rankers. He then expresses this to Yuan and invites him to join them, but Yuan replies that's undoubtedly not my goal. He asks in turn if he can keep fighting like this, and Chryseis responds with a chuckle that a new player would say such words, summoning a massive fireball as he internally thinks that someday he may brag about how he faced Kim Yuan when he was on the first floor. That is, if they survive this. Yuan reads his intent to kill or be killed, surprised at how desperate he is to take the old man. The two clash in a massive battle of mana as Yuan thinks he must hold on to prevent the tragedy that another Gigantomachia would bring. Chryseis then launches the fireball with all his strength, whilst Yuan draws on the rest of his strength as he compliments Chryseis to the latter's surprise. Subsequently, an enormous explosion of fire and mana swallows the surroundings. In the aftermath, Yuan appears unconscious with Chryseis on the floor, suffering the penalty. Agamemnon laughs as he sees that it's finally over, but is cut short when Hephaestus strikes him. He tries to crawl to escape, but Hephaestus says, unlike the others, he will definitely kill him. He loads his next strike with immense power. However, the strike is blocked by the administrator of the first floor, who tells him he's far too enraged. The administrator tells Hephaestus that if he wants the fight to go up, but Hephaestus states he didn't want the fight. The administrator then places a spell on Agamemnon that forces him to tell Zeus that the admin will pluck his beard if he tries this again, whilst Hephaestus watches on satisfied with the perfect loss of Olympus. If you enjoyed the vid, like, sub, and comment below. Peace.